It started as a regular afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but things quickly took a dark turn. A group of black kids was simply playing basketball on the street when two police officers pulled up. What should have been an ordinary moment spiraled into something unsettling. The officers began questioning the kids, their tones sharp, their words laced with unnecessary hostility. The kids, visibly confused and scared, tried to explain they were just having fun, but the officers weren't listening until their father arrived. Calm yet commanding, he stepped out of his car, wearing an air of authority that silenced the chaos. Little did the officers know, this man wasn't just any dad. He was a high-ranking diplomat with the power to shine a spotlight on injustice. What happens next will leave you speechless, as this father teaches a lesson no one will ever forget. Stay tuned for the full story. As the father approached, the officers exchanged uneasy glances. Dressed sharply and exuding quiet authority, he was a stark contrast to their initial assumptions. Without raising his voice, he asked the officers why they were stopping his children. One of them mumbled something about a noise complaint, but their discomfort was evident. The kids stood silently behind their father, still shaken, but now watching him with a mix of relief and awe. The father calmly explained that his children were simply playing outside, doing nothing wrong. But as he spoke, the officer's tone shifted, still defensive but now more cautious. They asked for his identification, almost as a challenge. That's when he pulled out his credentials, a diplomatic ID. Their faces froze. He wasn't just any parent, he was someone with influence, someone who could expose their actions in ways they hadn't imagined. The street seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly, but it wasn't lost on anyone watching that their politeness came too late. The father, still composed, asked pointed questions. What exactly did my children do to warrant this response? Was it the sound of their laughter, or was it something else? His calm voice carried an edge, forcing the officers to grapple with the weight of their actions. They stumbled over their words, trying to justify themselves, but their explanations only revealed the thinness of their reasoning. Meanwhile, neighbors started peeking out from their windows, some stepping onto their porches. The scene was drawing attention, and it was clear that this father wasn't going to let the moment pass without accountability. The kids stood close, whispering nervously. One of them quietly said, "This happens all the time, Dad." That single sentence hit hard, revealing a deeper, ongoing pain beneath this moment. The father's jaw tightened. He wasn't just dealing with these two officers, he was confronting a pattern that had scarred his family. Yet, the officers still didn't fully grasp what was happening. Their unease grew as the father's calm confidence left no room for excuses. "You didn't expect me to show up, did you?" he asked, locking eyes with them. They didn't respond. The tension hung thick, the weight of justice creeping closer. The street was quiet now, except for the tension crackling in the air. One of the officers, clearly flustered, tried to shift the blame. "We're just responding to a call," he said, his voice wavering. But the father wasn't letting them off the hook that easily. "And did that call include any mention of a crime? Or is the problem just the presence of my children on this street?" His words cut through the pretense, leaving the officers visibly uncomfortable. The neighbors who had gathered started murmuring among themselves. Some looked uneasy, while others nodded, clearly seeing what was unfolding. The father turned, scanning the small crowd, and spoke louder now. "This isn't just about my family. How many others here have felt like this? Afraid to just live your life because someone decides you don't belong?" His voice echoed with controlled emotion, and the weight of his words made people shift uncomfortably. The officer's attempts at control were slipping. One of them reached for his radio, mumbling about backup. But the father stepped forward, stopping him cold. "Before you escalate this further, think about what you're doing," he said firmly. "Think about the consequences, not just for my children, but for yourselves. Because today, the whole world is going to hear about this." The officers froze, realizing they were cornered. All eyes were on them, and there was no easy way out. Just as the tension seemed to peak, another car pulled up, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The father turned slightly, recognizing it immediately. Out stepped a well-dressed woman carrying a clipboard, her expression calm but determined. She walked straight toward the scene, her presence commanding attention. "Mr. Daniels," she said, addressing the father, "I came as soon as I heard." The officers exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsure who this new figure was. The woman introduced herself curtly, stating her role as a liaison from the consulate. She wasted no time. "These officers detained your children without cause?" she asked, her tone sharp and professional. The father nodded, and she immediately began documenting everything, taking photos of the scene and asking the officers for their badge numbers. One officer stammered, "There's no need for all this. This is just a misunderstanding." But the woman didn't flinch. "Misunderstanding or not, there will be a full report sent to the proper channels," she replied, her voice steady but unyielding. The neighbors were watching intently now, some pulling out their phones to record. And then came the twist. The father looked at the officers and said, I wasn't even planning to take this further, but hearing what my children have endured and seeing your behavior now, I've changed my mind." His voice was calm but resolute. "This is about more than just today. It's about ensuring this never happens again." The officers, now visibly uneasy, didn't know how to respond, but the father wasn't finished. He gestured toward the neighbors. "This isn't just my story anymore. Everyone here has seen what you did. The question is, how will you answer for it?" The stakes had never been higher, and the officers were running out of places to hide. The silence was almost deafening as the father stood his ground, his words hanging in the air. The officers shuffled awkwardly, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. One of them finally spoke, his voice shaky. "We didn't mean any harm. Maybe we overreacted." But the father wasn't letting them off with a weak apology. "Overreacted? Do you understand how moments like this shape my children's lives? How they'll carry this fear with them every time they step outside?" His voice broke slightly, the weight of his emotions finally surfacing. Then something unexpected happened. One of the neighbors stepped forward. "I saw the whole thing," she said firmly, holding up her phone, "and I've got it all on video." Another neighbor chimed in, "Me too. This has to stop." Slowly, the crowd grew louder, their collective voices rising in support of the father and his children. The officers, now visibly rattled, looked around at the growing crowd and the phones pointed at them. "We're sorry," one of them muttered, but it was too late. The liaison stepped forward again, her tone icy. "Your apologies won't undo the harm, but rest assured, this will not be swept under the rug. The consulate will ensure accountability." As the officers retreated to their car, the father knelt to his kids' level, pulling them into a hug. "You're safe now," he said softly. But just as the tension began to fade, the father stood and addressed the neighbors. "This can't end with just my family. We need to stand together to make sure no one else has to go through this." The unexpected twist. The father revealed he had already contacted the media before arriving. Minutes later, reporters arrived on the scene, cameras rolling, ensuring this moment, and the lessons it carried, would reach far beyond this street. As reporters began capturing the scene, the father took a moment to address them. With his kids standing by his side, he spoke with a steady voice. "This isn't just about what happened today. It's about a system that needs to change, a system that assumes guilt based on the color of someone's skin. My children deserve better, and so does every child in this community." His words resonated deeply, echoing through the growing crowd and beyond the cameras. The officers drove away in silence, their earlier confidence now replaced with unease. The liaison assured the father that the consulate would take this incident to the highest levels, ensuring justice would be served. The neighbors, now united by what they had witnessed, approached the father with words of support, offering to share their videos and stand by him. As the sun set on the street, the father held his children close. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, a determined look in his eyes. And as the family walked home, there was a sense of hope that this moment, though painful, would spark something bigger. a moment that would lead to change.